Hello everyone, my name is Catherine Gonzalez, and I will be answering question 1. My group and I will be speaking on the Black Arts Movement. The Black Arts Movement began in the year of 1965 and ended in the year of 1975. The Black Arts Movement was a Black nationalism movement that was mainly focused on literature, visual arts, music, and drama. The visual arts were made up of Black artists and intellectuals. Poet Amiri Baraka established in 1965 the Black Arts Repertory Theater in Harlem, New York City, as it being a place for artistic expression. Predecessors such as Audre Lorde, James Baldwin, Ntozake Shange, Gail Scott Aaron, and many more were all part of the Black Arts Movement. Black arts poets manifested ideas that were bold. The Black poetic language was one that brought out Black musical configuration, just as African folklore, jazz, and Black vernacular speech. The Black Arts Movement was aggressive, as Amiri Baraka stated that the goal was to be able to create art, a literature that would be able to fight for people's liberation. The Black Arts Movement was a way of envisioning a new perspective on the aspiration of a Black America. The Black Arts Movement proposals were very thoroughgoing on rearranging the Western culture and its way of being seen. 3 essentials that came from the Black Arts Movement, as it being established by Ron Karenga, was that Black art must be functional, collective, and committed. This was their way of making sure that what they said was set in motion and ran smoothly. This was very important because Black Arts Movement seek to make change of how Black people were being represented and portrayed, not only in literature, but in art as well. The Black Arts Movement made such a huge accomplishment and an enormous impact because this fell into the creation of African American Studies programs within universities. And this is a program that is still being used to this very day. Even though the Black Arts Movement lasted for such a short period of time, its impact was very influential and inspiring. The Black Arts Movement is something that became essential in history in the United States. The Black Arts Movement stimulated political activism and the use of speech throughout every African American community. And this was a way that allowed African Americans to be able to have a chance to express their voices in the mass media and to be able to be involved in other communities as well.
Hello there. My name is Emily Escalante, and I will be presenting to you the theoretical thinking of the Black Arts Movement and a critical essay that defines the movement. As Kathy mentioned, the Black Arts Movement has various political and social ideas that they express in their work about Blackness, social injustices, and conformity. Amiri Baraka, formerly known as Leroy Jones, was the group's primary theorist and highlights all of these issues in his 1991 critical essay, Cultural Revolution and the Literary Canon. Baraka's work was considered politically galvanizing as his work really came into fruition after the death of Malcolm X, in which Baraka announced his goal as, quote, to create an art, a literature that would fight for Black people's liberation with as much intensity as Malcolm X, our fire prophet, and the rest of the engaged masses who took to the streets, end quote. Baraka's essay touches upon these exact ideas as he writes about the divide between white and Black Americans and how the separation has caused tremendous anxiety within the Black and African American community because they have been forced into assimilation by their white counterparts, and how if they express any pushback or deviate from set expectations, they face devastating injustices as repercussions. Baraka points to past movements in history that have done what the Black Arts Movement was created to do. He hopes that Black people will define themselves on their own terms and not what white people have set up for them. Baraka urged Black artists to live lives that inspired the Black community, which he believed would consequently result in the furthering of Black art, potentially creating work greater than their predecessors. The Black Arts Movement aims to uplift fellow Black and African American people through the work of other Black and African American people. When discussing the wave of the Harlem Renaissance and its impact on the Black community, Baraka calls it, quote, a formal challenge to the social and aesthetic values of the segregated white supremacist U.S. and called for an attention by Black artists to live lives and culture of the Black masses as the inspirational muse that would create great African American art. Much like how the Harlem Renaissance influenced numerous poets during its time, the Black Arts Movement, Baraka believed, would achieve this as well. Baraka believed that through literature and poetry, the Black community could create their own liberation, celebrate their Blackness, and define Blackness on their own terms. We see this thinking expressed through various elements in literature and poetry, including Blackness as a symbol for beauty, use of Black poetic language through the inclusion of Black musical forms like field songs, folk music, jazz, etc., use of Black vernacular speech, and experimentation with sound, spelling, and grammar. The Black arts poets utilized these elements as keys to self-liberation and the awakening of the Black consciousness. All of these elements are specific to the Black community, and because of this, served as unique ways for Black artists to connect with other Black artists and their communities. Baraka's theoretical thinking was not only influential during his lifetime, but is still influential to this very day. Blackness has long been known as a symbol for darkness, evil, and negativity. However, poets from this movement, like Crystal Valentine, have since challenged what Blackness is as a symbol into one that embraces themselves, that is representative of being prideful in your roots, in order to combat racism and bring awareness to discrimination and prejudice against Black people. She uses various techniques that Baraka used as well, such as symbolism, use of Black vernacular speech, experimentation with grammar and sound, in order to achieve this. Valentine and other poets out of this movement push against conformity and speak on what's on their mind, demonstrating that though society would lead us to believe that there has been change, in reality the suffering is still very much present and rather packaged differently than it once was. Being assertive and straightforward through language unique to their community are the hopes that Baraka had poetry and literature would ignite within the Black community. These ideas that were realized through Baraka's theories and works are still relevant to living poets and contemporary poetry. We see examples of his influence in living poets such as Crystal Valentine, who embraces her Blackness and refuses to allow others to define it for her, Sonia Sanchez, who in her poem for Tupac Amaru Shakur uses repetition and imagery to relive the way society treats young Black men, and Tracy K. Smith, who uses her poetic language to call attention to the oppression and suffering of Black people. The fight for Black liberation is one that is still present to this very day, and therefore still relevant to poets and contemporary poetry, including but not limited to those who I have already mentioned, and will most likely continue to be relevant as the Black community continues to define Blackness on their own terms.
Hello everybody, this is Megan DeLeon, and I will be talking about 3 poems that represent the Black Arts Movement. One of the main focuses of the Black Arts Movement was to create an art or literature that would fight for Black liberation. Black arts poets expressed these ideas by using language that drew inspiration from music, such as jazz. The Black arts poets also embodied the ideas of self-determination and resilience by using Black vernacular speech and African folklore in their poetry. Poets were also known for using techniques that were examples of radical experimentation with sound, spelling, and grammar. One poem that represents the movement is Still I Rise by the well-known poet Maya Angelou. The poem begins by saying, "You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise." The poem is representative of the Black Arts Movement because the message behind the poem is overcoming hardship through being resilient. The poem suggests that the speaker is rising up despite the challenging circumstances. The poem continues with, "You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I'll rise." As the poem develops, we learn the speaker rises up in response to American society's hatred and oppression of Black people. Another poem that represents the Black Arts Movement is Power by Audre Lorde. The poem begins with, "The difference between poetry and rhetoric is being ready to kill yourself instead of your children." The poem Power by Audre Lorde is a graphic and impactful poem that takes on racism in the justice system, police brutality, and white supremacy. The poem continues with, "I am trapped on a desert of raw gunshot wounds and a dead child dragging his shattered black face off the edge of my sleep. Blood from his punctured cheeks and shoulders is the only liquid for miles, and my stomach churns at the imagined taste while my mouth splits into dry lips without loyalty or reason, thirsting for the wetness of his blood as it sinks into the whiteness of the desert where I am lost without imagery or magic, trying to make power out of hatred and destruction, trying to heal my dying son with kisses only the sun will bleach bones quicker." Within the text of the poem, Lorde addresses the murder of Clifford Glover, a 10-year-old Black boy who was shot and killed by a white police. The poem addressed the court that eventually didn't bring justice to Clifford or his family. Another poet, June Jordan, expresses the plight of African Americans in her Poem About My Rights. She begins with, "Even tonight, and I need to take a walk and clear my head about this poem about why I can't go out without changing my clothes, my shoes, my body posture, my gender identity, my age, my status as a woman, alone in the evening, alone on the streets, alone not being the point being that I can't do what I want to do with my own body because I am the wrong sex, the wrong age, the wrong skin." This poem is written in free verse, and the poem juxtaposes the personal odyssey of one Black woman facing oppression in America with the political struggle of nations against oppression in Southern Africa. The poems represent the efforts of Black arts poets to amplify Black voices and address issues of racism, oppression, and discrimination.
Hello everyone, my name is Gabriela and today I'll be answering question 4. I'll begin by talking about how Sonia Sanchez carried on the legacy of the Black Arts Movement in her poetic work. I'll begin by introducing who Sonia Sanchez is. Sonia Sanchez is an American poet, writer, and professor who is currently 87 years old. Sanchez was a leading figure in the Black Arts Movement, and her poetic work mainly focuses on separatist points of view because she drew inspiration from Malcolm X's ideology that, quote, Black people would never be accepted by white people, unquote. The Black Arts Movement was all about promoting Black power, and Sanchez has taken inspiration from that concept because her work consists of promoting, quote, Black unity and action against white oppression, unquote, according to the Encyclopedia. A poem from Sanchez that really showcases how she carried on the legacy of the Black Arts Movement is her poem called, quote, This is not a small voice. In this poem, Sanchez discusses the power of Black unity and how their collective voices allow for spreading love, healing, and creative genius. This is not a small voice also praises the beauty of the talent and creativity of Black people. It is a poem filled with admiration for Black people because of their resilience and courage. The next poem that carries on the legacy of the Black Arts Movement is Sanchez's poem called For Tupac Amaru Shakur. In this poem, Sanchez pays homage to Tupac, an incredible and iconic Black rapper who did so much for the Black community, but sadly was killed in a drive-by shooting. In the poem, she talks about the struggles of Black life and about the continuous death that young Black people face on a daily basis. Sanchez includes a wide variety of the Black community's experiences in her poems, and she uses street language and metaphors to take her readers into not only the Black community's experiences, but also how it differs from the white people's experiences. Another way that Sonia Sanchez says work carries on the legacy of the Black Arts Movement is how she preaches to young people that the ideologies that the Black Arts Movement stood for. In 2014, she spoke in a TED Talk video to a live audience and read her poem called What Does It Mean to Be Human? In this poem, she explores a very important question that the Black Arts Movement fought so hard to answer and that is still a very relevant question in the 21st century. She explores the idea of what it means to be a human being. Sanchez starts off by quoting Langston Hughes. It reads as follows, quote, There is a necessity to learn how to lean into each other's breath and breathe as one, unquote. She then proceeds to explain how that's what she and many other poets have been trying to do. They have been trying to stop the division and show the world that humans are, quote, all the same people but different shades of humanity. She then explains how that division needs to stop and that it is up to us young people to change things because, quote, it is our world, unquote. Sonia Sanchez not only was a leading figure in the starting of the Black Arts Movement, but she still to this day carries on the legacy of the Black Arts Movement through her poetry that speaks about changing the world so that every race, gender, sexuality, religion, etc. can be accepted in this society. Till this day, she fights for a world in which everyone is treated equally and accepted. That is how she carries on the legacy of the Black Arts Movement through her work, by writing and preaching about the acceptance and freedom for everyone. Lastly, I will leave you with a very beautiful quote from her. Quote, In order to be a true revolutionary, you must understand love, sacrifice, and death. Thank you for your time.